Hello and greetings to everybody in Tasmania. I'm only sorry I can't be there with you to join in the party and the incredible reunion. Of course, for me, the Flip-Flops expedition was largely about hut life, but there was a long period in the UK before the expedition when I got to know a good many of the expedition members and, of course, the wonderful Southern Quest. The whole time, the year anyhow, in the Antarctic was filled with highs and lows naturally, and it wouldn't have been right had it been one flat sort of monosyllabic event. But it rose and fell, and I haven't talked about the final moments of the expedition, the loss of the Southern Quest, because that will be covered, I know, in great depth by Gareth, Steve Broney, Tim Lovejoy, who spent that second winter out there, and I really have no part of that. Within 6 months of getting back to the UK at the end of the main expedition, I was married to my long-term girlfriend Sally, and yes, we are still married happily with 3 children. A boy, the youngest, and 2 girls. It's a great sadness, I know, that Peter Malcolm won't be with you, and I'm sure that Giles Kershaw would also have joined you had he been alive. I hope very much that Mike Seeney is well and has been able to join you all, and indeed I hope the reunion is the most tremendous success that it deserves to be. I think it was about 1982 I first became involved, in the sense that I saw an advert. I was sent an advert by a friend from a film magazine, professional film magazine. I was at that stage very interested as a pure amateur, and he sent me this advert, and it said Antarctic expedition, hardship guaranteed, cameraman wanted for 12 weeks in Antarctica. So I wrote off, and I was just on my way out to go skiing. Rob Swan, who was the leader of the In the Footsteps of Scott expedition, an enormous personality and a remarkable man all round. He said, come up to London and I'll take you to the warehouse where we all are. So I bundled myself up to London on the bus, Victoria Coach Station, and Rob picked me up in his large beaten up old Mercedes, and I always remember him getting out of the car, an enormous man wearing a fawn coloured jersey tucked into a pair of brown corduroy trousers with his colossal belt right between the two, and he was absolutely belt and braces and nothing but muscle. And we went off to I can't remember where it was now. I think it was Riverside Wharf or something like that, and I met a few of the expedition members, because at that stage it was fairly early days. Gareth Wood was not there that day. And Gareth was the Canadian who was to winter over, and he was in charge of building the hut and everything and anything that went into that hut, and he was off somewhere meeting people, so I didn't meet him. I met Roger. Roger was the technical leader, the man who was actually going to get the people to the South Pole. I met him briefly, and another formidable person, the wonderful, lovable Peter Malcolm. Peter was an ex-Royal Navy helicopter pilot, and a man with nothing but dynamism about him. I mean, he was determined, and if he wanted to do something, it would happen. And Peter was in charge of the ship operation, and he, in due course, was to find the ship that was suitable to get us all to the Antarctic. But a lovely man who very sadly died last year, 2009. I really did only want to make the film, that's true, and but I was prepared to certainly become involved on the shipping side, and I suppose the expedition thought that, you know, there's a guy who's been to the Antarctic before, worked for Bass on their ships, and he might be of some value to us there if we can't use him for the film. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but there were 68 other people who responded to the advert for the cameraman. What I didn't know was, of course, they'd said 12 weeks in their advert, but now they're telling me, when I meet them all in London, that it's actually 12 months, which was a bit of a blow, really, because I couldn't see myself spending 12 months away from the UK in these sort of circumstances. Well, expedition plans never progress smoothly. There's always a problem with money. I mean, whatever expedition it is, unless you're very, very lucky, money's going to be the issue. Personalities are also generally an issue. But this one was colossal. It really was an enormous expedition, fronted by Robert Swan. But there were other people who had to also pull the act together, and Peter Malcolm was quite remarkable in managing to get a ship together and to get a crew, a nucleus of people around him who could really, really make it work. There were rank amateurs and there were professional seafarers, and you know, I remember quite clearly at the time saying, we really shouldn't be using amateurs. The other thing I said at the time was that we shouldn't be using women. I was wrong on both counts, and I was wrong, and that's it. I don't mind admitting it. Peter absolutely convinced me that he would find people, and there were people already in the net who were working with him who were just fantastic. They again had dynamism, enthusiasm, and intelligence, and there were a few merchant seamen, and actually one or two of those were complete prats, and they didn't last long anyhow. There were several women involved in the expedition, and I remember one of them particularly, Debbie Overton, and she, of all the women, persuaded me that it was okay to have a woman on board, and I know it was a tremendous success, the women's side on the ship, and I'm glad I was wrong. From my own point of view, the expedition, because I was going to make the film, I kept lurching from sort of confidence to zero confidence. Was this going to work? How are we going to do it? Because we had to go out and get the sponsorship for the film itself, and also I had to sort of try and get some more training. And well, at one point I know I said I was out of it, and then another film company were going to come in and make it, and then we decided that we didn't want them anyhow because they were getting too ambitious and too big-headed about what they wanted to try and achieve. So I was back on board again. Then I went to the National Film School for a few weeks for a bit more training, and they seemed to think that, you know, as long as I carried on the way I was, I'd probably be all right. So yeah, by the time the ship did come to sail, I was reasonably confident, and we had more or less got together all the equipment. There was more to be gathered up in New Zealand and Australia, which I collected on our way through when we flew, because the ship crew sailed from London docks. They then went down to Cardiff, where we loaded on the final stores, mainly the coal, because this was the time of the miners' strike in Great Britain, and very graciously they'd allowed us to pick up the 20 tons or so of coal, which we were going to need for our hut. So that was loaded on board, and then from there the ship finally sailed, and leaving us 5 winterers to go on doing our various jobs. Robert obviously on the big sponsorship trail of the advertising, and Gareth and Roger doing their bit, and me trying to gather up equipment, and Mike Stroud, the doctor, who had been putting together his project for the 12 months, and we finally met up with the rest of them in New Zealand.
So you and the other 4 of the wintering team, as you mentioned there, flew down and met the rest of the team that sailed over in New Zealand. Did you feel that it was an us and them expedition, or did you bond quite well?
I think we bonded pretty well right from the word go, because I know we'd been with them throughout probably the last 9 months anyhow in the UK, and working very closely with them. I mean, I was sort of involved packing up all the provisions and putting them into the ship, and coming up with a few nasty surprises along that route, like stability of the ship. Gareth was there all the time. He lived in the warehouse amongst the rats and all the other vermin and debris. Roger was in the warehouse a lot of the time, certainly very local, and Robert was around. So we were all very much involved. I mean, there is always this problem, I suppose, that people go off and they do bond because they're doing a job. But it was 6 weeks, and I think by the time we all got together again in New Zealand, we hadn't really lost it with them. And then it was a week or so sailing from there. I was very lucky because we picked up in New Zealand a Kiwi cameraman, Royden Johnson, and his primary role was to just give me a bit more confidence and help in the opening stages. He was a great character, I mean, a great pisshead, and we had a good professional time. He did teach me a lot more. He did give me a lot more confidence, and I think, although he'd been to the Antarctic before, he had a thoroughly good time. We picked up some great Kiwis. There were carpenters. There was a chief mate who we picked up, and other crew members. So it wasn't just the original ship's crew and us. It was a whole lot more people who came together.
Can you go into a bit more detail on a few of the other characters on board?
Well, I mean, there were just some great people. Mike Seeney, he was the carpenter. A tremendous personality, big fellow, gangling sort of fellow, I think. So I haven't seen him since 25 years ago. But nothing was too much for him. Nothing fazed Mike, and he just got on and did his work, and not just carpentry. He just got into everything. Bernie the cook, he was a great guy. I mean, he just made food all the time, and he had a personality that went with it. He was tremendously good humoured and totally positive. Rebecca Ward, who was Robert's girlfriend at the time, she was great fun. She was a nice girl. Debbie Overton, she was just a solid sort of a pleasant girl, enthusiastic. It was a real team spirit, and there were very few ill words spoken in that period going south from New Zealand, and then of course we had the pretty frenetic time of building the base. It was actually very slightly embarrassing at first, at least. That what was I doing when everybody else was unloading the ship? It was. I think the ship was down there for best part of a week, I think, something like that anyhow. And we had to get all the stores off. Graham Phippen, the captain. Graham and I had sailed together in the British Antarctic Survey, so he was a wonderful captain for this sort of a role. I mean, his ability to communicate with these adventurous, non-professional people and the professionals who were also involved, he gelled it very, very well indeed. And we had this sort of not quite a 24-hour operation, and we worked very, very long days in 24-hour daylight because we had to get the ship unloaded as quickly as we could, because we just didn't know what the weather was going to do. And we were lucky. By and large, it was quite good. We had some nasty blizzards, but all I had to do was walk around with my camera on my shoulder, filming, and everybody else was slogging away. I mean, we had this pontoon, a barge, and that was just running the 200 metres between the ship and the shore, with stores on board being unloaded. Spirit of Incompetence, wonderful name. I think that was a Mike Seeney name. And that was running along, backwards and forwards all day long. People were humping stuff up the beach and laying food out.